Previously on the Main Street Chronicles. Walt and Sam travel back in time to meet Disney's gentle giant, as well as a gentle giant from the prehistoric age. They also learned of the complete story behind the creation of Disneyland's Haunted Mansion and how it almost never came to be. Let's listen in and see if Archimedes has any more surprises up his sleeve for them. Well, Walt, what do you think? Is this special enough for you?
Is that? It is. That's Tony Baxter. Oh, you know what this means. Yes, you know what this means. Wait right here, sir. Archimedes, please, sir, if you can wait just 1 second, please bear with me. I have to run up to the car and grab something. It'll take me 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Please just wait here. I'll be right back.
Oh, Walt, please don't. Here we go.
Sam? Where did Walt run off to?
Oh, you'll see. You know, I would really love to meet your historians. Is there any way that you can make that happen?
Well, in fact, I can. In November, Brian and Stokes will be in Walt Disney World for a meetup alongside the Disney Nerds podcast. You can meet them there and feel free to bring all of your friends with you as well. Stay tuned to the social media pages for more information.
Okay. I'm back. 1 second. Okay, I'm so sorry I had to run, but I'm back, and I am ready to continue. I just had to go get this out of the car.
No, you didn't. You're going to embarrass me now.
Oh, Walt? What is that on your head?
Well, thank you for asking, sir. I appreciate your interest. Sam, yes, I did have to do this, by the way. This is a hat that I made. It is a recreation of the Dreammobile from the original version of Journey into Imagination.
Oh, of course. So you made that yourself?
Yes, sir. I certainly did. In matter of fact, I have about 25 of them that I made. This is just one of my favorites, and I'm so glad that I had it in the car. But one thing about me that you should probably know is I love creating things. I love to see things being made from an idea into something physical that people can enjoy.
Oh, I sure would love to have one of your creations that we could place here in the museum.
For real? Like, you really want one?
Absolutely, my boy. This is a true work of art. Well, since you're clearly a fan of Tony's work, hopefully we can still teach you something you didn't know about him.
Clearly, yes, you could say I'm a pretty big fan of Mr. Baxter's work. So if you could teach me something new, I would be so thrilled.
Let me show you this.
Archimedes, are you hungry or something?
Why, yes, I am, actually. But that is not why I'm showing you the famous red popcorn cart from the hub at Disneyland. In fact, this cart right here is a replica of the one that Tony Baxter used to work at when he wasn't scooping ice cream at the Carnation Plaza Gardens ice cream shop.
Huh. So, I know quite a bit about Tony Baxter, and I don't know what this is in relation to his work as an Imagineer. You said he was a legendary Imagineer. I know he was. You said so yourself that he was, so I don't understand what this has to do with him.
Just listen.
Growing up in Southern California, Tony started his career at Disneyland at the age of 17, scooping ice cream on Main Street, USA. After several years of odd jobs around the park, he was finally able to get the attention of a few Imagineers through a portfolio of attraction concepts he had compiled and was hired at Wet Enterprises. His first project roles were relatively small, but he was eventually given extensive creative control of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. After this, he continued to be assigned high-level roles in Imagineering projects.
Tony is a great example of how you can work your way from the bottom all the way to the top. Starting out at 17 years old, scooping ice cream, I bet he never could have imagined the future that was in store for him. After graduating from Cal State Long Beach in 1969, he would embark on a 43-year adventure that would give the world many iconic attractions and tell stories that would go on to thrill generations of people around the world.
So throughout our discussions, we focused a lot on how Imagineers got their start in the Disney company. And Tony's was a little bit different than everyone else's, wasn't it?
It really was. It's almost like he just had this desire and this dream to work at Disneyland and work for Walt himself. And even back in his early days, he was a visionary. He had the ideas that he wanted to potentially pursue and put into Disneyland. This is a great example of how when you have a dream and a goal, you stick to it and you see it till it comes to an end.
Exactly. This is the embodiment of perseverance. He had the ideas and he had the belief in his own talents. And as a result, he was, like you said, able to work his way all the way to the top. And as we'll learn, goes on to create some of the most memorable attractions in Disney history.
And many of us can actually say that he helped shape our childhood. I know we both can say that. And if it wasn't for the creative mind of Tony Baxter and coming up with these concepts and ideas that would go on to live throughout every single Disney park, I'm not sure what our childhoods would have looked like.
Just looking at his story, it gives everybody hope, not even just working in the Disney company, but any company. It shows that if you believe in yourself, you believe in your talents, as long as you're driven to move forward, really the sky can only be the limit.
That's absolutely true. And I think that we can, as a fan base, as a culture, use his drive and determination of perseverance and creativity and say, you know what, tomorrow is going to be a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
Well, I don't really understand what this popcorn cart's doing here, but I can tell you one thing. I am enjoying the popcorn that it makes.
Walt, if you can dream it, you can do it. Right, Archimedes?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Archimedes, what is this? It's not a blimp and it's not a hot air balloon. I've never seen anything like this before.
That, my dear, is a dirigible. This is what blimps evolved from. This is used to represent an unbuilt land that Tony designed for Disneyland called Discovery Bay. Let's listen in and see what would have been had it been built.
Discovery Bay was an unbuilt land for Disneyland, designed by Tony in the late 1970s. Set in a technologically advanced late 1800s San Francisco, attractions based on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and the Island at the Top of the World were prominent features.
While working on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad in 1979, Tony was considering ideas for what to do with the rest of the old Nature's Wonderland space, and a story for what could be done with all of the gold in the mountain. Much of Discovery Bay was tied into the original backstory of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. As described in a 1992 issue of Disney News, the highly imaginative tale includes the legend of a young inventor named Jason Chandler who lived in a town called International Village during the peak gold rush years in the Big Thunder region. According to the Chronicles, the young inventor devised a drilling machine with the capability of boring into the very heart of Big Thunder Mountain. There, the veins of gold ran so deep, it was rumored they could produce a mother lode that would bring a man enough wealth to last 100 lifetimes or more.
But a cave-in occurred on Big Thunder, burying 26 miners alive. They would have drawn their last breath then and there had it not been for the inventor and his laughable drilling machine. He burrowed down into the Earth's core, rescuing the miners from certain death. It should have been a moment of joy and celebration, but as the men scrambled to the arms of safety, a massive earthquake shook the ground and a cavernous maw opened up, swallowing the inventor and his machine whole. The miners as well as the citizens of the village struggled day and night against the mountain, trying to dig the young man from his living tomb. But they never saw him or another nugget of gold again. Big Thunder had taken its vengeance not only on the miners, but on their wealth as well. The mountain had gone bust, and it became just a matter of time before only ghosts resided there. Unknown to everyone else, Jason Chandler survived the incident, but knowing the wealth of gold could easily be abused, chose to use the gold to fund research for any inventor whose odd ideas had been turned down by everyone else. He established a new home on the California coast near San Francisco called Discovery Bay, and amongst these first adventures was a meeting with Ned Land to locate and salvage the Nautilus from its watery grave.
Some of the ideas proposed for Discovery Bay found their way into other projects and parks. These included Journey into Imagination, which was based on Professor Marvel's Gallery of Illusion. The characters of Professor Marvel and his baby dragon companion became Dreamfinder and Figment. Discoveryland, which took on the Victorian science fiction theme and featured both the Nautilus and the Hyperion airship. Mysterious Island, which based itself off of the works of Jules Verne. The Fireworks Factory would become a restaurant at the now-defunct Pleasure Island. The Society of Explorers and Adventurers, which has incorporated the Jason Chandler character into its ranks as the president of the late 1800s incarnation of the group. References to the character and this newfound status were incorporated into the Magic Kingdom version of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
So
and
looking
the
at the
Skipper
failed
Canteen
project of
restaurant.
Discovery Bay really shows how big of a dreamer and storyteller that Tony Baxter really was. He was looking to take an underperforming area of the park that needed some life breathed into it and came up with this huge story with these really interesting characters and all of these different moving parts with ideas for attractions and restaurants and shops, and really just kind of blew everybody out of the water with it.
You know, it really is. It's absolutely amazing when you allow someone the opportunity to use their creativity and what they can come up with. To be able to come up with an entire land to, as you said, use an underdeveloped, underutilized piece of property and turn it into something that would have been a game changer is kind of mind-blowing to me, because I mean, you have all these great minds, and yet nobody could have come up with anything quite like this except for Tony Baxter. And as we'll talk about later on, while this project may not have come to fruition, it did in many different iterations.
You're right, and I think it really does speak to that creativity that even all of these years later, people are still talking about his original idea and how impressive and how big the story really was.
And with this being an unbuilt land and being able to use these ideas in as many different places throughout the course of Disney history, it again goes back to the concept of there is no such thing as a bad idea at Disney Imagineering. And it may not work right then, but it may work in the future. So it's amazing that still to this day, we're still utilizing Tony Baxter's ideas and concepts in the parks around the world.
So Walt has already shared this, but this is the real Dreammobile. And it was part of the original dark ride that used to inhabit the Imagination Pavilion in Epcot Center, called Journey into Imagination. Walt, why don't you turn your hat on and see what happens?
How did you know that I could turn it on?
Well, just turn it on already.
Journey into Imagination and the rest of the pavilion were late additions to the plans for Epcot. When Tony's ideas for the Land Pavilion were turned down, he turned his attention to Kodak's Pavilion. Requesting a pavilion based around the imagination, Tony and his team went through a 6-month process of figuring out how best to tell a story about the creative process, settling on the basic 3 steps of gathering, storing, and recombining ideas, which would provide the attraction structure.
The characters they would create would be derived from the canceled Discovery Bay project for Disneyland. One of the attractions, Professor Marvel's House of Illusions, featured a bearded scientist who had a hobby of breeding dragons, which would evolve into Dreamfinder and Figment.
The attraction's most unique feature, the turntable that allowed for a stationary scene on an Omnimover attraction, would be one of the most difficult parts of the attraction to develop and the first thing to go when the attraction was replaced. The vehicles would lock into place on one of 5 identical scenes like cogs, and then unlock to go onto the track containing the rest of the attraction.
The attraction began with the ride vehicles floating in the clouds and seeing silhouettes of a strange blimp mixed with a vacuum cleaner, and hearing the humming and singing of its pilot. In the next scene, the guests came right next to the vessel, and the pilot, an old man with a red beard, dressed in a blue suit and top hat, introduces himself as the Dreamfinder, and saying that he uses his vehicle, called the Dreammobile, to collect dreams and ideas to create all sorts of new things. Soon he created a figment of his imagination, who came up from a pot near the back of the Dreammobile. This figment was appropriately named Figment. He then proceeded to come up with enough ideas to fill the Dreammobile's idea bag, all of which would show up later in the ride. Dreamfinder then told Figment that before they could create something, they had to go back to the Dreamport, which he said was never far away it's when you really used your interesting imagination.
that
Tony and his team were working on the original concept for the Land Pavilion for the original Epcot Center, and were abruptly told, hey, you need to go and work on Kodak's Pavilion. I can't even imagine what went through his mind at the time when he was working on a project to then be moved to another project. But it's interesting and it's unique that he already had concepts from other unbuilt attractions and unbuilt lands that he was able to pull into the Imagination Pavilion and then make a seamless transition almost and bring us an iconic pavilion that we still have today.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying. A good idea never dies with Disney, and Tony was really embodying that again here. And the fact that his ideas from Discovery Bay were the solution to coming up with the story there. And again, it really shows his dedication to coming up with the perfect story for the guests, that they did take 6 months to come up with that perfect idea.
And with that, I think that's something that speaks volumes to Tony himself, is that he was always thinking of the guest and their experience and wanting to come up with a well-rounded and complete story for us, the guests, to be able to enjoy. Still now 40 years down the road almost, that Figment is still such an influential part of the Epcot experience.
Oh, exactly. And Figment isn't just influential part. He's over time grown more and more and more influential, to the point that he's almost like the face of the park at this point too.
Yeah, it's every year it seems like we're getting more and more Figment, which is fantastic. He actually was the original mascot of Epcot Center. If you think about it, back in the day, the Fab Five and other Disney characters were not allowed inside of the park. And Michael Eisner said, hey, we need to have some kind of character. So they created Figment, and he and Dreamfinder were the mascot for Epcot Center. He went away for the 90s, and now I think he's coming back with a vengeance, and I really hope that he sticks around for years to come.
Whoa. How'd you do that?
How did your hat turn on the video screen? It's very simple, my boy. It's Disney magic. As a matter of fact, I would very much like to have that hat to be the one that we display here in the museum, if that's okay with you.
Oh, this one? Yeah, no. I mean, are you sure you want this one though? Like, I could make you like an even better one probably.
Walt, are you kidding? Just give it to him already. You created something that has Disney magic in it. You should be honored and proud.
No, obviously, I know, but I mean, it's kind of my favorite.
You can make another one. Here, Archimedes. He would love to give it to you.
Oh, thank you, Walt. Now I think we have saved the best for last. What do you think?
Oh my goodness. It's
Splash Mountain.
It's our favorite attraction. This is absolutely amazing.
Would you like to hear the story of how it was created? It's pretty interesting, if I do say so myself.
I would love to hear that story.
Let's have some zippity-doo-dah fun.
The idea for Splash Mountain was originally conceived in the summer of 1983 by Tony while stuck in rush hour traffic on his way to work. He wanted to attract guests to the often empty Bear Country land, with the only attraction being Country Bear Jamboree, plus a souvenir shop. He also wanted to make use of the audio animatronics from America Sings, which was also receiving poor attendance. It was Dick Nunis who insisted that the Imagineers create a log flume for Disneyland, but the Imagineers were initially unenthusiastic about it, insisting that log flumes were too ordinary of a theme park attraction to be included in a park like Disneyland. While trying to solve the problems of including a log flume, bringing people into Bear Country, and reusing the America Sings characters, Tony then thought of Song of the South.
Construction began at Disneyland in April of 1987. By that time, Splash Mountain, whose budget had risen greatly to $75 million, had become one of the most expensive projects created by Walt Disney Imagineering. According to Alice Davis, when America Sings closed in April of 1988, production of Disneyland Splash Mountain had gone far over budget. The only way to recover was to close down America Sings and use the characters from that attraction. Tony and his team developed the concept of Zip-a-Dee River Run, which would incorporate scenes from Song of the South. The name was later changed to Splash Mountain after then CEO Michael Eisner's mostly ignored suggestion that the attraction be used to help market the film Splash. The characters from America Sings were used in many scenes, though all of the main characters were specifically designed for Splash Mountain.
The planned grand opening on July 17, 1989 didn't go quite as hoped for. Early riders made up of the company's executives were getting quite soaked rather than lightly sprayed, and so the ride opening date had to be delayed for months so that the boats could be redesigned to hold less passengers, to build them lighter, and to redesign the bottom and bow to make them less likely to spray so much water aboard.
In 1991, construction began for the Splash Mountains at Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom and Tokyo Disneyland. On July 17, 1992, soft openings began at the Magic Kingdom. The two Splash Mountains officially opened within a day of each other in October of 1992. The Tokyo attraction opened on October 1st, and the Magic Kingdom attraction opened the next day. So we decided to choose Tony as an Imagineering legend because he represents
So I'm going to take
what
a page
to
out of
us?
your book, Stokes, and I'm going to go with a hyphenated word. Problem solver. Tony is the ultimate problem solver. Anytime there was something that needed to be done or fix an issue, he was there to come up with the solution. Case in point, you've got Bear Country. We just talked about it in the Splash Mountain story. You have multiple problems there. You have an unutilized piece of property back in the back of the park. You have a president of the company who's wanting you to use a log flume, and it's not an attractive option for Imagineers. And you also have an underperforming America Sings in Tomorrowland. So what do? Only Tony could have taken all of these variables, an underutilized part of the property at Disneyland, an underperforming attraction in Tomorrowland with America Sings, a ride system that Imagineers didn't want to use, and throw in a lesser-known live-action animated film that Walt Disney created, and you put that all together and you get the instant classic that is Splash Mountain.
And I think another example of that problem solving is what we talked about earlier with the Imagination Pavilion. Most people might look at it getting transferred from all the work you've done with the land. All of a sudden, that project and a lot of the work that you've done is kind of just pulled right out from under you, and some of those ideas might never be used again, and you're put into this new situation. A lot of people can look at that as like a terrifying situation, but Tony didn't let himself get discouraged by that. He took it in stride and ended up, again, as we stated earlier, creating one of the most well-known characters throughout Epcot's history.
Absolutely, and he took that moment of potentially being down from being moved from project to project to looking at projects that he had already been told no on and seeing how he could best utilize those. So he was always looking at things that didn't necessarily work and seeing how he could, in a use of a Disney word, plus it up, make it an effective use of the concept in another form or in another place.
I love that Tony Baxter was able to incorporate Mark Davis's characters into Splash Mountain.
Hey, look at you. Looks like somebody's learning something after all.
Of course I am, but are you?
Yeah, that's an understatement. I am actually learning way more than I thought I was going to at the beginning of this. No offense. Yeah, I mean, honestly. But, what is that over there? Is that like a glowing vault? Well, you know I gotta go see what's in there.
Oh, that's, nothing. Nothing to see here. Let's keep it moving. We're almost done.
And Stokes, what word would
The
you
word
use
that I
to
would use
describe
to
Tony?
describe Tony is imagination. If we think back to Marty Sklar specifically, he's famous, and he put this in all of his books, for saying a blank page or a blank canvas can be either the most terrifying or the most exciting thing in the world. I think Tony's the embodiment of making that the most exciting thing in the world. And this comes down to his imagination and his ability to create these very immersive stories. Prime example, again, is going to be going back to Discovery Bay. It's one of his earliest projects that he's worked on, and he's basically trying to take an underperforming area of the park and plus it up to a huge extent, and that's what he ends up doing. He creates this great immersive backstory and all of these different rides and attractions and restaurants that end up being used in the rest of the parks throughout the world.
You know, it's funny, when you brought up the blank sheet of paper, I immediately thought of Tony and said he's the perfect example of how to best utilize that. He really thrived on creating new and unique concepts and taking that empty piece of property or taking that blank sheet and making it an iconic piece of Disney parks, not just history, but parks lore, and really helping shape what many of us could say is our childhoods.
And even going back to what we talked about with Splash Mountain and going back into your problem solver word, taking an attraction like Splash Mountain that's created out of a lesser known film. A lot of people hadn't seen it. It's a lot older than a lot of the movies that were being featured in attractions at the time. But it's the story and it's the characters and it's the whole idea that he put behind the attraction that really makes it relatable to people even in present day.
Tune in next month as Archimedes leads us into a new adventure in the Hall of Imagineering as we learn the told and untold stories of another Imagineer.
Hey everyone, this is Lisa and Jimmy from the Disney Nerds podcast. We are so excited to announce our 7th annual Disney Nerds podcast meetups happening this November.
Our meetups this year will include on Thursday night our first ever premium event. This is a paid event, which is a fireworks viewing party, hopefully for Harmonious. We don't know the details yet, but it's $70 per adult and will also include a 2-hour open bar.
We will also be having a Friday night meetup, a half sample-a-thon around World Showcase Lagoon at Epcot. This is a free event. We hope you'll join us for that.
And I think our most anticipated event every year is our scavenger hunt. Our scavenger hunt this year will be at Disney's Hollywood Studios and take place in Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story Land. So this is also a free event, which we also do a lot of fun giveaways and prizes for the winners and second and third places usually. So we hope you can join us for that as well. All of our events are listed in the event section of the Disney Nerds Podcast Facebook page. So make sure to check us out over there and let us know if you're coming.
So be sure to join us and the shows of the Imagination Radio Network for some fun this November. We hope to see you there.
You've been listening to the Main Street Chronicles, part of the Imagination Radio Network and a BRS production.
Would you like to go on another adventure?
Oh, and if you're curious about that glowing vault, head on over to the Main Street Chronicles YouTube channel to find out the tales of adventure that are stored inside of our glowing vault.